Welcome, dear listener. Settle yourself somewhere soft, let your shoulders fall, and breathe out the day behind you. Tonight, we are going to walk together into another century, into a quiet evening high in the mountains, long before electric lights, long before the hurry of clocks. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the pictures come slowly. There is no rush here. There will never be any rush here. Imagine, if you will, a long stone road that climbs and climbs, winding patiently to the heart of the Alps. It is the late 18th century, and the road is the old Gotthard route, a thin ribbon of gray stone stitched between two worlds. The warm southern valleys behind us, the misted northern forests still ahead. The year hardly matters. What matters is the hour. Twilight has come to the pass, and with it, a deep and gentle hush. We are walking now, in the soft boots of a weary traveler, at the very tail of a long day's journey. The air up here is thin and cool and clean, carrying the scent of wet stone, of pine resin, of wood smoke drifting from somewhere we cannot yet see. Each breath feels like the first sip of cold spring water. Each breath is a small, quiet gift. On either side of the road rise the great jagged peaks, their shoulders brushed with the last rose-gold light of the sun. The stone is streaked with old snow, pale as lamb's wool, and the shadows between the ridges have begun to pool into deep velvet blue. High above, the first shy star has opened its eye, only one for now. It watches us the way a kind grandmother watches a child coming home. Listen, can you hear it? Somewhere down the valley, across a great distance of empty air, a chapel bell is tolling. Not urgently, not sadly, just slowly, slowly, the way a heart beats when it is finally at rest. One note. A long pause. Another note. It is the evening Angelus, rung by hands we will never know, calling the shepherds down from the high meadows, calling the weary to supper, calling the day gently toward its close. The sound rolls up the mountain and meets us on the path, softened by distance, as if the bell itself were made of wool and candlelight. The road beneath our feet is worn smooth by centuries of passage. Monks have walked this stone. Merchants have led their mules along it, their saddlebags heavy with silk and salt and honey. Pilgrims have crossed it on their way to Rome, and soldiers have trudged it back from wars they would rather forget. Every one of them, when they reached this bend in the path, would have paused just where you pause now, and looked up and breathed out and smiled. Because there, at last, tucked into a fold of the mountainside, is the post house. It is a long, low building of dark timber and pale stone, with a deep roof of heavy slate weighted against the winter storms. A thread of smoke rises from its chimney, curling into the cold evening air like the signature of something warm and patient. The shutters at its windows are drawn nearly closed, but only nearly. Through the narrow gaps, the first lanterns have begun their work, and their light leaks out in soft amber bars, laying themselves gently across the snow and the gray stones of the courtyard. That light, oh, that light! It is the color of honey poured from a wooden spoon. It is the color of a childhood kitchen. It is the color of being expected, of being remembered, of being welcome without having to say a word. It is the color of being expected, of being remembered, of being welcome without having to say a word. In a world that has been all blue dusk and gray stone for hours, that small steady glow is the first promise of rest. As we draw nearer, the sounds of the house begin to gather around us like a quiet quilt. The low murmur of voices within, speaking a soft mountain dialect none of us needs to understand. The cozy clatter of a spoon against an earthenware bowl. Somewhere, a dog gives a single, sleepy bark, and then, satisfied that all is well, falls silent again. A horse in the stable shifts its weight and sighs. That long, contented sigh only horses know how to give. Our traveler stops just at the edge of the courtyard. The pack on their shoulders feels lighter already. The cold at the back of their neck is forgotten. They take one more breath of the great, still night. And then, slowly, gratefully, they step into the honey-colored light, and we step with them. The door closes behind them with a sound that is more feeling than noise. A soft wooden sigh, the kind a house makes when it has been waiting a long time for someone to come in. The iron latch settles into its cradle. The wind, which had been pressing at their back like an old argument, is suddenly on the other side of the world, and the stillness that replaces it is so complete it seems to have weight, to settle gently on their shoulders like a second coat. The man who has opened the door stands a little to the side now, giving them room to arrive. He is not a tall man. He is not a young one. His name is Anselm, and he has kept this post house for 37 winters, which he will mention only if asked, and even then only as a number, not a boast. His hair is the color of hearth ash, his beard is trimmed close, his hands, folded loosely before him, are the hands of a person who has lifted many latches, tended many fires, poured many cups of something hot into the bowls of cold travelers, and each of these gestures has worn his palms as smooth as river stones. "Welcome," he says, and the word is not loud. It is a candle, not a bell. "Welcome in, friend." He takes a step forward, patient as weather, and his eyes crinkle at the corners the way eyes crinkle on faces that have smiled at many doorways. He sees the frost in the traveler's hair. He sees the fatigue that is not in the body only, but in some deeper place, the kind of tiredness that comes from carrying oneself a long way through thin air. He does not remark on it. To remark would be to draw attention, and Anselm has learned, over the long, slow schooling of the pass, that kindness is sometimes quietness. He reaches instead for the coat. His fingers find the collar with the gentle, practiced ease of someone unharnessing a horse. The garment lifts away, heavy with the night's cold, and with it lifts something the traveler had not known they were still carrying. He shakes it once, lightly, and hangs it on a wooden peg by the door, beside a row of other coats. Some new, some faded, some belonging, perhaps, to men who have not yet come back from whatever errand called them down the mountain. A lantern burns on the wall above, low and unhurried, and the coats breathe quietly in its glow. "Come, come," Anselm murmurs, turning. "The fire is kind tonight." He walks ahead with the slow, even gait of a man who has learned, long ago, that there is no haste inside these walls. He walks ahead with the slow, even gait of a man who has learned, long ago, that there is no haste inside these walls. His boots make a soft clock-clock on the worn pine floor. The traveler follows. The corridor is low and golden. The beams overhead are dark with smoke and the patient polish of years, and between them hang ropes of dried herbs. Juniper, Alpine mint, the pale silver green of edelweiss. that send down a scent as old as the house itself, faintly sweet, faintly green, the way memory is green. They pass a small shrine set into the wall, a carved Madonna no taller than a forearm, with a tiny oil lamp flickering before her painted feet. Anselm bows his head to it without pausing, the gesture so ingrained it is no more effortful than breath. He does not explain. He does not need to. The traveler feels, somewhere under the ribs, a little loosening, the kind of quiet that comes when one enters a place whose habits are older than their own troubles. "I bring every guest this way," Anselm says softly, more to the house than to his guest. "It is the way the evening goes. First the door, then the coat, then the fire, then whatever the traveler wishes, a bowl, a bed, a question, or simply to sit and to warm the hands and to say nothing at all. All of these are welcome here. Ahead, at the corridor's end, a doorway stands open, and from it pours a light so warm, so generous, that it seems to come not from flames, but from some kinder sun, a sun that rises inside houses on winter nights. The smell of wood smoke drifts out to meet them, and with it the low crackle of burning larch, and the ticking of a clock, and, very faint, as if from another room entirely, the slow breathing of a kettle that has no intention of hurrying. Anselm steps to the side. He gestures, with an old man's courtly grace, for the traveler to go first. And the traveler does. The door opens inward on leather hinges that have learned, over the decades, to move without complaint. A breath of warm air meets the traveler first, before the sight of anything does, a soft exhalation of the house itself, smelling faintly of wood smoke and beeswax, of wool drying somewhere, of soup that has been simmering since the light was still blue on the snow. It is the smell of arrival. It is the smell of the word inside. The common room is low-ceilinged, as these old hospices always are, so that the heat will gather in a living body, rather than drift up into rafters and be lost. Dark beams run overhead, polished smooth by 200 winters of lantern smoke and the slow rise of breath from sleeping guests. Between the beams, the plaster is the color of cream left out on a table, not white, not quite gold, but somewhere between, softened by the years. At the far end of the room, set into a wall of field stone the color of river mud, stands the hearth. It is taller than a man, and wide enough that two travelers could stand inside it in summer and look up and see a blue coin of sky. Tonight, though, it is a world of its own. A great log of pine, split down its length, lies across the iron dogs, and around it, beneath it, woven into its grain, there burn the embers. Not a roaring fire. Not tonight. That was for earlier, when the room was cold and the kettle needed coaxing. Now in this hour after supper, when the wind has settled and the mountain has settled and the house has settled, the fire has become embers and the embers have become a garden. Look a moment longer. Look a moment longer. Let the eyes rest there. There are the bright cores, orange as the belly of a trout. There are the paler places, the color of apricot skin, where a coal has burnt itself almost to ash, but has not yet given up its warmth. There are the tiny blue flames that come and go at the edges of a split, shy as small fish in shallow water. And above it all, now and then, a single spark will drift upward, spiral once, and be gone, like a thought one almost remembered, and then did not need to. Anselm has seen to the seating without seeming to. The traveler is in a high-backed chair of dark wood, its curved back lined with a cushion that has been beaten over the years into the exact softness a weary shoulder would choose. A woolen blanket, brown and cream in a plain checked weave, has come to rest across the knees. A cup of something warm has appeared on the small table to the right. Not tea, not quite. Something herbed, something mountain-grown, with a steam that curls slowly, slowly, like a cat turning once before it settles. On the mantel above the hearth, a black forest clock keeps the time of this room. It is a plain clock, not a cuckoo, not a fancy thing. A carved face of dark walnut, roses, and oak leaves, worked into the wood by a hand long since at rest. Its pendulum swings behind a little glass door. *A pause. *A pause. Each talk is the size of a single breath. It is almost impossible, listening to it, not to begin to breathe along with it. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps that is why it was carved. Elsewhere in the room, other travelers have already crossed the threshold into sleep's first shallows. An older man in a great gray coat sits in the chair nearest the hearth, his chin sunk gently to his chest, a book open on his lap, the page unturned for some while now. A woman in a red shawl breathes deeply and evenly by the window, her knitting laid aside, the needles still crossed in their last gesture. A young postboy, off duty, has curled himself like a kitten on the bench along the wall, one arm beneath his cheek, his boots set neatly beneath him. No one speaks. There is no need. The house is speaking for everyone. The fire pops, once, softly, a small wet sound like a word said in sleep. A draft moves along the floor and finds nothing to disturb. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pot is stirred, a lid replaced. The clock measures the evening into its quiet portions. *A pause. And the pine wood, burning slow, gives up the forest it once was in a breath that smells of green summers and long rain, and the high places where the trees stand closest to the stars. And from beyond the heavy curtain that separates the kitchen from the common room, there comes now the soft shuffle of felt slippers on stone, and the quiet clink of earthenware, and a voice so low it seems almost part of the fire's own murmuring. It is Anselm's daughter, Verena, and she is bringing supper. She moves as mountain people move in the evening, without hurry, without sound that is not needful. In her hands she carries a wooden tray, darkened by 100,000 such journeys from hearth to table, and upon the tray there rests a small world of simple things. A loaf of dark rye bread, round as a full moon and nearly as old in its making. A wedge of hard yellow cheese, pale at the rind and golden at the heart. A wedge of hard yellow cheese, pale at the rind and golden at the heart. And a deep brown bowl steaming gently, in which floats the slow patient supper of the high country, a broth of barley and roots, and whatever the garden gave before the snow came down. She sets the tray upon the table, and the table receives it the way the valley receives the snow, softly, without complaint. The bread is cut first. It does not crumble. It yields the way old things yield, reluctantly and with dignity. This bread was made 3 days ago, in the great oven that sits behind the post house, the oven whose stones hold heat the way a grandmother holds a sleeping child. The flour came up by mule in autumn from the mills at Airolo, where the river runs fast and the wheel turns with a sound like distant thunder softened by water. Rye, mostly. A little barley for the sweetness. A pinch of caraway, because Verena's mother had put caraway in her bread, and her mother's mother before that, And so the small brown seeds travel down the generations, carrying the flavor of winters that are finished and winters that are yet to come. The cheese now. The cheese has its own story, and it is a story that begins in sunlight. Far above the post house, higher even than the pass itself, there are summer pastures where the grass grows sweet and low and is scattered with gentian and Alpine rose and small white stars, whose names only the cows remember. Each June, when the last of the snow draws back into the shaded hollows, the herders go up with their bells and their dogs and their soft songs, and the cows follow, slow and heavy and patient, and they eat of that good green mountain, and they make of it a milk that tastes of nothing you have ever tasted before. A milk full of wildflowers and thin, sweet air and the memory of melted snow. And that milk, in the high huts, is coaxed and warmed and waited over, and turned by old hands into wheels of cheese, which are then carried down, 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 on the backs of quiet men, to the cellar caves below the post house, where the air is always cool and always still, and where the cheeses sleep on plank shelves for months and months, dreaming their slow dreams, ripening into the gold that now rests upon Verina's wooden tray. And the broth. The broth is perhaps the oldest of the three. It has been simmering since morning in a blackened copper pot above a bed of pine wood coals. Inside it are pearl barley that has given up its hardness, and carrots that have surrendered their stripes of orange to the water, and turnip, and a little leek, and the last of the autumn parsnips, and a bone. Only a bone, because in mountain kitchens nothing is wasted. Not the bone, not the peelings, not the quiet hours between stirring and stirring again. A sprig of thyme, picked in August and hung from the rafter to dry. A whisper of salt from the Alpine springs, where the rock gives up its minerals one slow drip at a time. To taste the broth is to taste patience. It is to taste a kitchen that does not rush. It is to taste the slow clock of mountain life, where the pot is put on in the morning and forgotten and remembered and stirred and forgotten again, and by evening the broth has quietly become itself. Verena ladles a measure into the deep brown bowl. Verena ladles a measure into the deep brown bowl. A ribbon of steam climbs up and joins the soft drift of smoke from the hearth, and together they lose themselves in the dim rafters, among the hanging braids of onions, the dusted bundles of thyme, the dark oak beams, where the heat of a century of suppers has settled and stayed, and where, tonight, it welcomes one more. The bowl is set before the traveler, and for a long while nothing is said at all. There is only the small, patient music of a wooden spoon moving through broth, the quiet clink of pewter on oak, the slow sigh of the fire settling deeper into its own glowing heart. Outside, the wind has grown drowsy too, leaning against the shutters like a tired old horse resting its weight on a fence rail. Anselm takes down his long clay pipe from the ledge above the hearth, though he does not yet fill it. He only holds it between his hands, turning it as if warming his palms on the memory of smoke. Then, in a voice no louder than the fire, he begins to speak. He speaks as the old postmasters of the pass have always spoken, not to teach, not to impress, but simply to keep the shape of the mountain story intact for one more evening. First come the Romans, he says, and the word itself seems to echo a little in the rafters. Long, long ago, before this house, before the chapel, before even the idea of a road as we know it, there were Roman legionaries who looked up at these crags and saw, not a wall, but a door. They made paths where goats had made paths, and over those paths they carried the small, surprising things of empire: a bronze lamp, a sealed letter, a handful of olives wrapped in cloth. Snow covered their footprints by morning, and yet by spring there were always new footprints, a little higher, a little braver. Then, he says, came the centuries of silence. The past slept under 1,000 winters. The stones forgot the sandal and remembered only the wolf, the chamois, the slow grinding of ice against ice. And high above, the stars turned without witnesses, and the mountain was left to be a mountain, which is perhaps what a mountain most wants to be. But in time, the pilgrims came, quiet people, cloaked and cold, with staves in their hands and the names of distant cathedrals stitched into their hems. They came from the gray cities of the north, walking toward Rome as one walks toward a lantern seen at the end of a very long hall. They sang as they climbed, he says, and sometimes, if the wind is right, an old postmaster will swear he can still hear them, very faintly, in the high meadows after vespers. A scrap of planchet, passing through the centuries the way a moth passes through candlelight. The bowls are empty now. Verena gathers them without hurry, and the traveler folds his hands upon the table, and his eyelids grow heavy as a curtain drawn for the night. Then, says Anselm, there is the Devil's Bridge. Ah, yes, every pass must have its devil, and ours is a polite one. The story is told of a bridge that no mason could build, for the river below was too wild, and the gorge too deep, and each attempt was swept away before the keystone could be set. And so at last, so they say, the people struck a bargain with the old gentleman in black, who raised the bridge in a single night. In exchange, he asked only for the soul of the first creature to cross it. And the cleverest villager, come morning, sent across a goat. And the cleverest villager, come morning, sent across a goat. The devil, they say, was so disgusted by the trick that he hurled a great stone into the valley and stalked away, and you can still see that stone, mossy and patient, lying on its side by the river, like a piece of old furniture left behind by a tenant who will not be returning. The traveler smiles, slowly, the way one smiles at a story heard in childhood. And then, Anselm says, there are the mule trains. Oh, the mule trains. In the long summers of the middle centuries, they moved across these heights in slow, jingling rivers, silk from the south, folded in cedar chests, salt from the great works, packed in barrels bound with iron, spices the color of embers, wines in sealed jugs, letters, coins, a new pair of boots for a merchant's son in Lucerne. Each mule wore a bell, and each bell had its own small voice, and together they made the sound of commerce, which, if you listened long enough, came to sound very much like prayer. The fire murmurs, the rafters darken, somewhere a shudder settles, and Anselm's voice grows softer still, as if he is lowering a lamp, little by little, toward the surface of a dark and quiet pool, and the room, now, is listening the way snow listens, without effort, without hurry, without any need at all to understand. We slip away from the parlor now, very gently, the way one might step over a sleeping cat, careful of the floorboards, careful of the hush, and we drift down a short passage that smells of old timber and melted tallow, past a door that does not quite latch, past a peg where a greatcoat hangs heavy with the memory of snow, and out into the covered walk that joins the post house to its stables. The night is there, waiting, but it does not startle us. It only breathes. The cold touches our cheeks the way a clean linen sheet does, and above the slate roofs, the stars are so plentiful and so patient that they seem less like fire and more like quiet company. A lantern sways on a hook at the stable door, and its little flame leans and rights itself, and leans again, as if it too is nodding towards sleep. We lift the latch. We step inside. And oh, the warmth! It greets us first, before the eyes have even adjusted. That deep, living warmth that only animals and hay can make together. A warmth that seems to come from the floor, and from the rafters, and from the soft flanks of the creatures themselves. The air is thick with the good, drowsy smells of the world. Sweet hay, new straw, the honest tang of leather, the faint cider scent of apples kept in a corner barrel, and underneath it all the warm, grassy breath of horses. There are 6 of them tonight. Post horses, stout and shaggy, bred for the long climb and the longer descent, their coats still faintly damp from the day's journey, and drying now in slow, contented steam. One is the color of wet bark. One is dapple gray, like a stone that has lived a long time in a stream. One is nearly black, with a white star on his brow no bigger than a thumbprint. And the others are simply shapes of kindness in the half-light. Heads lowered, ears softening, eyes half closed. They are standing in deep straw, up past their fetlocks, and the straw rustles faintly whenever one of them shifts a hoof. A small, dry, whispering sound, like a page being turned in another room. Listen, just listen. There is the slow bellows of their breathing. In and out, in and out, in and out. A great unhurried tide of air, so steady you could set a clock by it, except no clock in the world keeps time this gently. Now and then a horse sighs, a long, shuddering, wholly satisfied sigh, and the other horses seem to answer without answering, simply by being near. There is the soft creak of a harness hung on its peg, swaying the tiniest bit as the building settles. There is the hiss of the stable lantern, that faint, companionable hiss of oil meeting wick, the same small song it has been singing for hours and hours, and will go on singing until morning. And there, in the stall nearest the door, curled in the straw like a comma at the end of a long, kind sentence, is the stable boy. He cannot be more than 12. His cap has slipped down over one eye. His cheek is pressed to the warm flank of the dapple gray, who stands perfectly still, as if he understands. The boy's hand is open in the straw, palm up, fingers loose, and a single wisp of hay rises and falls on his breath. A wooden currycomb has tumbled from his lap. He has fallen asleep mid-duty, and no one, not the horse, not the lantern, not the night itself, has the heart to wake him. Somewhere above us, in the hayloft, a barn cat turns once in her nest and settles again. A mouse, somewhere, is being exceedingly polite. Outside, the wind tries the door, finds it firm, and moves on up the pass, carrying with it whatever small errands the dark still has to run. And we stand here a moment longer in this low golden room at the roof of Europe, where 6 great hearts are beating slow, and one small heart is beating slower, and the lantern breathes its soft, soft hiss, and the straw whispers, and the leather creaks, and the night, the whole enormous Alpine night, seems content to simply wait outside the door. Sleep is already here, you see. It has been here all along. It lives in the stables before it lives in the house. It comes up through the hay, and along the horses' warm sides, and into the curled hand of a boy who did not mean to close his eyes, and who closed them anyway because some places, simply ask it of you. And this is one of them. From the stable, then, we return, quietly, carefully, the way one always returns from a place where something has fallen asleep, on tiptoe almost, as though the air itself were a thing one might wake. The innkeeper waits by the side door with a small brass candlestick in her hand, and the flame inside the hornpane is the color of warm honey held up to a window. She does not speak. She only tilts her head toward the stairs, and you follow, and the little light goes ahead of you both, painting the walls in soft, moving gold. The staircase is old, older, perhaps, than the inn itself. Reused timber, the way mountain people reuse everything. Nothing wasted, nothing thrown away that still remembers how to hold weight. Each step speaks as you place your foot upon it. A low, wooden word. A creak that is almost a sigh. The sound of a house that has been climbed by many, many tired travelers, and has learned their tiredness by heart and forgiven it. Up you go, past a landing where a dried sprig of edelweiss hangs from a nail, past a narrow window where the last pale light of the pass is folding itself away behind the stone, past the smell of beeswax and of old pine and of the faint wood smoke that has lived in these beams so long it is simply part of them now. At the top, a low door. At the top, a low door. The innkeeper lifts the latch. Sleep well. Only that. And then she is gone, and her candle is gone, and only yours remains. The chamber is small, beautifully small, the kind of room that does not ask much of you, and gives, in return, everything. A beam crosses the low ceiling, dark, smooth, worn soft by a century of fingers reaching up to touch it in passing. A washstand stands by the wall with a blue and white pitcher, and a folded square of linen laid beside a cake of soap that smells faintly of lavender and tallow. The floor is bare, save for one small wool rug, the red of it long since faded to the color of autumn apples left too long on the tree. And there is the window. One window, narrow, deep set in stone, the glass uneven and ripply the way old glass is, so that the peaks outside seem to lean, very gently, as though they were leaning closer to see who has come tonight. The highest snow still holds a little light, a blue light, a last light, and as you stand and look, that light thins and becomes at last only the idea of light, and then only the memory of it. You set down the candle. You turn. And there, filling most of the room the way only a good mountain bed can, is the featherbed. Oh, the featherbed. High off the floor. Piled deep. A mattress of linen wrapped down. And above it a second layer, softer still. And above that a quilt so plump it seems almost to breathe of its own accord. The sheets are undyed linen, laundered 1,000 times, the weave gone soft as milk. The pillow is round and generous, dressed in a slip embroidered at its edge with a small run of blue cross-stitch, the kind a grandmother makes without looking, while speaking of other things. You sit on the edge of it, slowly, and the bed receives you the way a deep snowdrift receives a falling feather, without protest, without hurry, simply opening, simply holding. You begin to unbutton your coat. One button, then another. The wool is still cold at the shoulders from the walk across the yard, but already, beneath the layers, the warmth of the inn has begun its quiet work. The third button. The fourth. Each one a small letting go. Each one a small permission. The coat slips from your shoulders. It is heavy. It has carried you a long way today, across stone, across pass, across hours. You lay it over the back of the single wooden chair, the way you might lay a sleeping child upon a pew, careful not to wake it. Your boots come next. The laces loosen. The leather eases. Your feet, freed, press against the cool wooden boards, and then lift, and then find the warm wool of the rug, and then find, at last, the quilted edge of the featherbed itself. And still, you are not yet lying down. You are only, for this moment, allowing the idea of lying down to arrive. But before that idea becomes emotion, before the body surrenders its last small intentions to the bed, something turns your head toward the window. Perhaps it is the shape of the moonlight, drawn in a pale, leaning rectangle across the floor. Perhaps it is only the old, soft pull of the mountains themselves, which, even through stone and shutter, seem to know when a traveler is near, and seem, in their slow, patient way, to wish to be looked upon once more before the candle is lowered. You rise, just for a moment, just for a breath, just for a breath. The floorboards are cool again, but you have learned the warmth of the rug, and you step from island to island of warmth, as though crossing a quiet, forgiving stream. The window is small, no wider than the span of your two hands. Its glass imperfect, slightly wavering, as though it still remembered being liquid once, long ago, in some distant furnace. You lean close. Your breath blooms softly against the pane, a pale flower that opens, and then, very gently, closes again. And there, beyond the glass, the world is waiting. The peaks stand as they have always stood, white-shouldered, immense, patient beyond measure. The snow upon them is not simply white tonight. It is silvered, pale blue at the hollows, soft lavender along the ridges, and, here and there, where the moon catches a drift just so, almost the color of pearl, the snowfields pour downward like slow rivers of light, folding into valleys you cannot quite see, gathering into hushed basins where nothing moves at all. Above them, the sky is a deep, velvet cloth, stretched taut and stitched with stars. You can see the wheel of the constellations turning, so slowly that it is not truly motion, only the idea of motion. The Great Bear, low and watchful, the faint thread of the Milky Way spilled like flour across a dark table. The pole star, steady, steady, a small, patient lantern at the top of the world. Each star seems to have been placed with enormous care, as though by someone who knew that tonight, at this hour, a tired traveler would look up and would need to feel that the world was, in fact, well ordered, well kept, and watched over. A single cloud drifts past the face of the moon. It is thin as a scarf, and it pauses, as though uncertain, and then moves on. The pass itself lies silent below you. You can just make out the pale ribbon of the road, winding down, down, losing itself among the boulders, reappearing where the drifts thin. No lantern moves upon it now. No bell sounds from any harness. The mule teams are stabled. The wagons are still. The other travelers are folded into their own warm rooms, their own soft beds, their own slow, gentle breathings. Even the wind, which earlier had worried at the eaves, has quieted now into something that is only barely a whisper, only barely a hush, only the soft, attentive listening of the mountains themselves. And you, standing at this small window, feel the enormous, tender quiet of it all settle onto your shoulders like a second cloak. Your thoughts, which have traveled so far today, now travel more softly. They drift the way the snow drifts, the way the cloud drifted across the moon, without hurry, without destination, You think, faintly, of the road behind you, but it does not trouble you. You think, faintly, of the road ahead, but it does not hurry you. Both roads, for this one long, generous moment, have laid themselves down to rest. You think of the warm copper tub already cooling in its corner. You think of the soup bowl, empty on the side table. You think of your boots by the hearth, their leather slowly softening in the glow. You think of the small, steady breath of the stove, and the larger, deeper breath of the mountain, and how, somehow, tonight, they seem to be breathing together. The moon slides a hair's width west. The stars turn a hair's width with it. A single flake of snow detaches from the sill outside, spins twice in the moonlight, and is gone. You smile, without quite meaning to. You smile, without quite meaning to. It is enough now. The mountains have been greeted. The stars have been counted, not by number, but by presence. The world has been seen, and has, in some quiet way, seen you back, and has approved of your small candlelit window, and your tired eyes, and your slow waiting bed. You step back from the glass. Your breath flower fades from the pane, and you turn, at last, toward the featherbed which has been waiting for you all this long and gentle while. But before you sink into its soft white country, let your ear drift, just for a little while, down through the floorboards, down through the slow, dark beams, down into the great room below, where the last small life of the inn is making its quiet way towards sleep. There, by the wide stone hearth, old Anselm is beginning his rounds. He has done this every night for 40 winters. His hands know the work the way a river knows its bed. He does not have to think. He only has to move, slowly, from one small task to the next, the way a shepherd moves among sleeping sheep, touching each one gently on the wool. He kneels by the fire first. The great logs have burned down to a glowing country of coals, soft red hills, pale gold valleys, here and there a thread of blue flame still wandering, like a small traveler who has not yet found the inn. Anselm takes the iron poker, worn smooth by his palm, and gathers the embers inward. He banks them carefully against the back wall of the hearth, heaping the warm ash over them like a quilt of fine gray snow. He is not putting the fire out. He is putting it to bed. In the morning, before the world wakes, he will rake those coals open again, and the fire will be there, waiting, having dreamed all night beneath its blanket. He stands, slowly, with the small soft sound an old man makes when he stands, one hand on his lower back, a breath let out through the nose. Then he turns to the long table. 3 candles still burn there, in their plain tin holders. He cups his hand behind the first flame, leans close, and breathes a single gentle breath. The light bows, flickers, and folds itself into a curl of pale smoke that rises and disappears into the rafters. He moves to the next, cups, breathes, folds, then the third. With each small darkness, the room grows softer. Shadows that were sharp become round. Corners that were lit become deep, kind pockets of dusk. Only one candle remains lit now, the small lantern he carries with him, swinging at his side, casting a slow walking circle of gold across the floorboards as he moves. He goes to the front shutters. The wind is up tonight, a high cold wind off the pass, and the wood rattles softly, the way a sleeper turns and dreams. Anselm checks each iron latch with his thumb. Click, click. He tugs each shutter inward, just a little, to feel that it is set. He murmurs something to the wind, something old in the dialect of these mountains, a word that is half a blessing and half a good night, and the shutters sit quiet, and the wind goes on around the eaves without him. In the corner, by the dying warmth of the hearth, the old inn dog lifts his great gray head from his paws. He is so old that his muzzle has gone the color of wood smoke. He watches Anselm with eyes that have known every traveler this room has ever held. His tail thumps once against the floor, a single soft drum of welcome. Anselm crosses to him, lowers himself with that same careful breath onto one knee. He lays his hand on the wide, flat plate of the dog's head, between the ears, and he scratches there, very gently, in the place the dog has loved since he was a pup. "Ya, ya," Anselm says, low. "Soon we sleep." The dog closes his eyes, his breath grows long, his chest rises, falls, like a slow tide on a small dark beach. For a long moment the old man simply kneels there in the lantern's small ring of gold, his hand on the dog, the room around them sinking deeper and deeper into a velvet, friendly dark, the ticking of the tall clock in the hall, the settling of one beam against another, far above, the faint, distant whisper of snow against the western wall. Then Anselm rises, lifts his lantern, and makes his last walk of the night. Past the stilled tables, past the cold hooks where the travelers, cloaks now hang in patient rows, past the staircase that climbs up, and up, toward the small warm rooms where every weary soul, including yours, is being gathered into rest. He pauses at the foot of the stairs, looks up just once, and smiles, the smallest smile, as though somehow he knows you are there, and then he is gone. Up the stairs, one soft footfall after another, until even the groan of the old pine boards fades into the hush of the hallway above. The common room settles. The lanterns, one by one, are lowered. A gentle hand turns a brass key. A little wheel of flame retreats into itself, glows orange, then amber, then the color of a single autumn leaf pressed between the pages of a book. The last lamp near the hearth keeps only the faintest whisper of light, just enough to paint the wooden beams with a soft, honeyed glow. It is the kind of light you remember from childhood, from rooms where you were allowed to drift off while the grown-ups spoke quietly nearby. The coals in the fireplace have done their long work. They no longer leap, no longer dance. They simply breathe. Here and there, a small red eye opens within the ash, considers the room, and closes again. A thread of pale smoke rises straight up the chimney, as tidy and unhurried as a prayer. The iron pot, emptied now, cools slowly on its hook, and the kettle on the back of the stove lets out one final, contented sigh. Outside, the snow is falling. It has been falling since you first heard the bell at the gate, long ago in the early part of the evening, though it feels almost as if no time has passed at all. The flakes are large now, slow, unhurried, the kind that seem to think before they land. They settle on the eaves. They settle on the woodpile beneath its little roof of planks. They settle on the stone trough where, hours ago, a weary horse drank deep. They gather on the shoulders of the lantern above the door, until the lantern wears a soft white cap, and its flame, within, looks all the warmer for it. The pass, which by day can roar and bite and test the courage of any traveler, is quiet tonight. The wind has laid itself down among the crags like an old dog in its straw. Somewhere far above, A single star finds a window through the clouds, looks in upon the valley, and approves. In the stable, the horses have folded their long legs beneath them. Their warm breath rises in slow plumes and mingles with the smell of clean hay and oiled leather. Their warm breath rises in slow plumes and mingles with the smell of clean hay and oiled leather. The tabby cat, who earlier walked so proudly along the beams, is curled now in the curve of a saddlebag, one paw over her nose, dreaming small and perfect dreams. Upstairs, behind each door, a life rests. The merchant from the south lies beneath a quilt, patched from a dozen old journeys, his ledger closed, his worries set down at last like a heavy coat hung on a hook. The young courier sleeps with one hand tucked beneath his cheek, the way he slept as a boy. The old woman who told stories by the fire dreams of a kitchen she has not seen in 40 winters, and of a song her mother used to hum while kneading bread. The child, the one who fell asleep in the great chair with crumbs on her chin, has been carried gently upstairs, tucked in, kissed on the forehead, and told, without words, that she is safe. And the post house itself seems to exhale. Its timbers, grown in these mountains long before any of us were born, creak softly, the way old friends murmur to one another when the conversation is done and only companionship remains. So let the snow keep falling. Let it wrap the roof and the road and the little chapel down the slope whose bell will not ring again until morning. Let it soften the edges of the world until the world is only a pillow and a blanket and a slow, steady breath. May the mountains be gentle tonight, with all who shelter in their shadow. May the travelers, wherever they lie, be warm and unhurried and unafraid. May every small lamp that still burns in every small window burn only long enough to welcome one more weary heart home. And may you, yes, you, who have come all this way with us, up the winding road, through the lanternlit, into the hush at the top of the world, may you be held just as kindly. The last coal in the hearth glows once more, a single slow heartbeat of red beneath the ash. Then it too closes its eye. Outside, the snow keeps falling, softly, softly, as though the sky itself were tucking the mountain in. And here, in the quiet, you are already halfway into your dream. Sleep now. Sleep well.